Yo, several months ago, actually 4 or 5 months ago, the company Heltec sent me the Heltec Mesh Pocket for the purpose of a review and an evaluation. Never have I really had a device and a video get so much in my head, but you're still going to get to see the video today. A couple things I want to point out about this video is just because I have a viewpoint, and in this video, I will walk you through my thought process on things, where I think this product could be improved on, and ultimately, I tell you who I think this product is really geared for. But I want to point out, just because I'm giving my opinions doesn't mean I'm correct, but it also doesn't mean we have the right to disrespect each other. It gets really old. One thing I do want to point out about this video that is about to start is during this video, I talk about this being advertised as a rugged device, which it's either no longer advertised as a rugged device or I just can't find it. So forgive me, but I'm not going to re-record the whole episode. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope at the end of this video you decide whether the Heltec Mesh Pocket is right for you or not. If I had to tell you one thing about making YouTube videos, it's I get in my own head, and that's probably why I have 1, 2, 3 Heltec Mesh Pockets. Let's talk about it right now on Dude Tested. So if you're new to Meshtastic, I'll give you a brief summary of what it is, but basically the ability to send messages to other people off grid, or meaning if cellular networks go down, there's still a way to communicate with people. Now, picture yourself at a sporting event or a concert, okay? We have a big one coming up here, Riot Fest, and I know that there's a group of guys who bring their Meshtastic devices, such as the Mesh Pocket or maybe their rugged mesh radio or their T1000E. Now, I'll talk about that again in just a bit, and I'll leave a link below for a video on the torture test that I did with this device. So before we go into the broken devices and why I have so many Mesh Pockets, let's take a look at one fresh out of the box. This Mesh Pocket power bank is a magnetic charger, USB-C charging, and of course, it's a Meshtastic device. And it uses what would be called an e-ink display. So let's go ahead and open this up here. When we open up the Mesh Pocket, we see that, we get this little carrying case. And I will talk about this little carrying case in just a moment here. You get this little ring that actually goes on your cell phone. And as you could see, I've been using one on my cell phone. Of course, you're provided with a USB-C to USB-C cable, and this is nice for things like charging external devices. We'll put this to the side, and then we'll take a look at, well, this is actually new. I don't remember receiving this in either of my boxes. Maybe I overlooked it, but I'm not sure exactly what this is. It looks like it covers the USB-C charging port to help prevent, I'm making this up here, but to help prevent water from ingressing into the unit. I could be completely wrong about that, and we'll find out in just a moment. Let's take a step back and talk about the first unit that I received from Heltec for the purpose of a review and an evaluation. And when I received it, it wasn't cracked. It looked just like this, except the screen itself had a bunch of foreign characters on here, kind of like you see over here, but the whole screen was covered in them. I'll see if I can get a photo and put it right here. Of course, I got to tell you, it's really hard to do a showcase in a review of a product when the whole screen is a bunch of weird characters. So Heltec, I reached out to them, and they worked with me a little bit. They had me try to upgrade the firmware, which at that time, you had to download a file and upload it to a drive. Now you can go to flasher.meshtastic.org, and this device is listed in the list of devices to flash, so it makes it a little bit easier. But that didn't resolve the actual issue. And at that point, I had this Meshtastic device, which I'm thinking, I can't do anything with it. So they send me a new one. And, when they sent me that new one, it looked like this. It was completely functional. I immediately went downstairs to start recording and to give you an idea of basically my experience. It was at that point I was walking out the door, and from around my waist, I dropped this device for the first time. Actually, there was a piece of glass right there. I dropped this device for the first time and immediately the glass screen on the front shattered. By the way, the sides are made up of ABS, which is a pretty strong durable plastic, but the glass screen on the front is there for the e-ink display. And I was really disappointed that this broke and shattered. So meanwhile, I'm using this device, which again looked like this, and everything was fine and functional with it. I drove around town, I did some tests, things were cool. And then I realized that if this one broke so easy, I should try to break the replacement they sent me. Now, in hindsight, that's probably not the best idea when a company is sending you free gear and you're abusing it, but that's also kind of what we do here on Dude Tested. And I think that goes why I get into my own head. It's because I hear so many times about other people saying like, you didn't say this and you didn't say that and you didn't say that. And I'm like, bro, this is my experience with the device and how I would operate it. So I guess in the same sense, I don't feel guilty that I'm doing these hardcore tests because for me, in my case, when this was originally advertised as rugged, I would be expecting to take it out on the beach, not worry about it, and maybe drop it and not worry about it. You know, I would call this, with the name rugged on it, by the way, I would call this rugged. In fact, I would call the T1000 rugged. And so me doing this drop and drop and drop and drop after this one shattered, I don't think is too far-fetched to test that. In fact, you're probably going to want to see that if your use case is going to be rugged. So after I dropped this one a few times, the back partially opened up, the adhesive separated, and therefore we get to see the inside. Let's take a look at the inside because I know that some of you want to see the inside. And by the way, again, if this isn't your kind of video, if these aren't the things you're looking for, somebody's personal experience, that's cool. Go watch some video that just unboxes it and shows you all the specs from the manual. And this is cool because the first observation I made with the Meshtastic Mesh Pocket was when it separates, if it separates, the ribbon cable is soldered on to the main board itself. And here's a good look at the main board for you. But what does that mean? Well, if it does separate, or if you need to replace that front glass like you see here, you might have a problem because those are some really fine soldering points and the whole ribbon cable is soldered on instead of clipped on. So maybe that's something of concern to you. Additionally, this little piece of magnet wire that comes through here was attached to this small board here, as I recall, and that one came out pretty easy as well. But you also do get to see the 5 amp hour battery, 19.35 watts JHY with the part number of this right here, 5362880 Henry Victor at 3.87 volts. Now you can see that the actual screen housing or the screen itself was held onto the front glass case by 2 pieces of like adhesive putty. I think that if it gets a little bit warm, I mean, that's just going to peel off. So it's something to keep in mind. And finally, I do want to point out that the antenna right here goes into right here. Now, the performance that I had on this unit right here, and we'll get to that in a second, but I would say that it was pretty good performance in the aspect of I was about 20 to 30 miles away from Chicago, and I was picking up some stations direct in Chicago. Now, with something like the rugged radio that has mesh radio, rugged US 915, that has an external antenna, I was picking up more stations direct from Chicago and even one over in the St. Joseph, Michigan area. So that was pretty dang good. Like I said, I didn't pick up that Michigan station with this one, and the performance was I didn't see as many stations direct with the Mesh Pocket. It's a little bit more of a compromise when you have an internal antenna like this, as opposed to probably a more resonant antenna like this. And if we could jump back to that point, you know, I was dropping this one, and besides it separating with the adhesive on here, it really held up. The screen didn't crack. And I have to attribute it to properly using what I thought was going to be a useless bag or case for this. It's turned out to be probably very beneficial. Maybe in the future, a TPU designed case that goes over the Mesh Pocket. on the corners, kind of like a cell phone case protector, would be a good idea, because that way if you drop it, the TPU takes the impact. As I mentioned, I was at the beach and I was utilizing this to see how far I can make contacts, because it was pretty much at this point where I realized, yeah, these were breaking. By the way, when it's separated from the case, it was still completely functional. It just had a gap because the adhesive came off. And it really did get me thinking, okay, I'm making a big deal of nothing, because really at the end of the day, I still have the ability to utilize this device. The Bluetooth still synced to my phone, which allowed me to send, receive messages, configure the radio. There was nothing I couldn't do, even with a broken screen, even with these weird fonts that you see here. Everything is still functional. And to me, I was like, well, wait a minute, this is, dude, tested. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, I keep getting into my head, but it just progresses naturally. I like to break things, and we got to break it and test it. And I'm happy to report it still worked. Was I a fan of the wireless charging? I'm getting somewhere with this. I wasn't a fan of the wireless charging. You know, for example, the magnet that you have on your phone, for example, it tended to come off fairly easy. And I didn't necessarily appreciate that. But I guess in a pinch, if I needed to charge my phone, it's cool. Now it's hooked up to my phone via the wireless port, albeit there's a case here, which might slow down charging a little bit and heat things up a little bit more in my experience. But all I have to do is hit the CTL button. You're going to see this thing go into a charge mode. And then as we flip it over, we'll see it's charging. And I thought that was neat, but I don't really have a use for it, to be honest. So then I really started to get to thinking, well, I guess technically you could still keep this. And technically you could still have a 5 amp hour Meshtastic device if maybe Heltec would consider replacing the glass, ditching the screen. I know some people want to see the screen, but ditch the screen and ditch the glass and do just a piece of ABS plastic on the front as well. So now you have a somewhat more rugged device. I mean, I threw this out a window. I hit it with a power washer, the T1000 Sense Cap. The thing still performs like it did on day one. The MeshPocket wasn't really built for a guy like me who's looking for a very rugged, if I drop it, things are going to happen kind of device. I mean that in the most respectful way, because when something is engineered, they have a audience that they're trying to target. I'm not that audience. In fact, when I was out in the field or at the beach, I dropped this, and because of the magnetic properties of the charger as well as the side charger, this thing was covered in black sand. And it's not a horrible thing. In fact, that's probably why they give you this now as well. But at the end of the day, I'm going to beat this thing up way more than who their targeted audience was. I picture the Heltec Mesh Pocket being used by somebody who's going to keep this in a backpack, you know, maybe keep it in their pocket, or keep it somewhere where it's not going to come out and be used too much, which again kind of defeats the purpose of the e-ink display. So I guess the lesson that I'm walking myself through is I probably didn't need a second device sent from Heltec for this video. I didn't need to buy a third device. I haven't even really used it yet. Because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you know, it's good to know all the things that may go wrong. But if something goes wrong, I need to know that the device is still going to function. And even with a non-functional screen, even with dropping it and glass coming into my fingers, it still functions as it should. I'm still able to pick up Meshtastic nodes around the area, send messages to Meshtastic nodes, and everything is fine in that aspect. I'm the wrong target audience for this, and maybe somebody who's going to put it in their backpack, or it's not gonna be moved around or thrown around too much. Maybe this is for you. But I want to leave Heltec with my thought on it. Heltec can continue to sell the Mesh Pocket, but maybe you make a Mesh Pocket XD, which would be like the Mesh Pocket Extreme Duty. I stole that one from Springfield. And what it would be the same 5 amp hour battery, which, by the way, 5 amp hours with very minimal use lasted me 1 week, 7 days. If we had a Heltec Mesh Pocket XD version, To me, it wouldn't have any kind of glass cover, therefore it probably wouldn't have the e-ink display. And I think that that's fair because you would still get the 5 amp hour battery. You'd still be using your phone to send messages, receive messages, check messages. And all of a sudden, you don't have to worry as much about dropping it and it shattering, which if it shatters at the wrong time, you might get a lot of foreign debris internally. If they were to consider those changes, another thing they might want to consider is some kind of hinge system, which this USB-C cover hinges out to the side like this so you could charge, and then hinges closed so that when you're using it, no dust ingresses or minimal dust ingresses. And I guess the only other thing, so first of all, those changes I really do believe would make this a much more sturdy, reliable, durable unit. Not saying that it's a bad unit. I'm just saying if I'm going to pay $70, I personally am going to want something more rugged. If going that route also, though, I made the observation just a moment ago that, like I mentioned, here we have our antenna, which connects somehow via this little ribbon here, right here. And that basically means that there's no real place for us to mount an external SMA port. Maybe that could be an option as well to make this a more rugged, reliable, Meshtastic off-grid communication device. If you're going to be using it around the office and stuff, cool. If you're going to be using it outdoors, just make sure that you're going to exercise some caution. And really, I hope more than anything, Heltec takes that consideration of my product modifications and maybe they make something a little bit more rugged. Okay, to recap everything, I'm not saying Heltec is a bad company. In fact, I think Heltec is a great company. In my video, I did my best to lay out some of the things that I saw in my mind, in my perspective, in my bias that could be improved on. Okay. And my mind came into this whole perception and thought process with based on my views, how I see Meshtastic being utilized in the communities. Now, I know that there's a large community of Meshtastic and you can't speak for everybody, but I do think that the rugged outdoor community type is fairly prominent within Meshtastic. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I'm going to leave you with one more kind of story that some of you might not like. However, I think it portrays the point that I'm trying to make about today. About a year ago, I had a gentleman come up to me and he was telling me all about his new pistol that he's using for concealed weapons carry or concealed carry. And at that point, I had naturally asked, well, how does it shoot? To which he replied, I don't know. I haven't shot it yet. Red flags, whistles, bells, alarms started going off in this little brain of mine because the fact of the matter is if you have a warrior mindset, you fight how you train how you're going to fight. And part of that whole mindset is getting to know your equipment in and out, the pros, the cons, will it work, and also having confidence that it will work. If a warrior can't trust his equipment fully, is he going to use it in a battle? And I know that that's an extreme thought process for some people out there, but for other people, you'll understand and grasp what I'm saying, that I want to make sure that I'm going to have reliable communications if I ever need them, and I want to make sure they're going to work. In my case with the Heltec Mesh Pocket, that even though the screen shattered and the screen was all messed up, it still did work. It's not that it's not going to work. It's that it may not work. And I think that that's my point about the warrior mindset who trains with the equipment they're going to fight with, and they know their equipment in or out. Another part of me says that if possible, you're not going to go into a situation with equipment that you just don't fully trust. But again, I want to just point out that there's a lot of good suggestions in here and a lot of room for improvement for my use case. Thank you for watching the channel. Thank you, Heltec, for sending this device, and y'all have a good one.